Your negative thoughts are almost never correct about how things actually turn out, but time and again, you give them your undivided attention. That one habit is costing you more than you know. The moment you learn to stop believing your thoughts automatically, the anxiety, the spiraling, the self doubt, all of it starts to lose its grip. Miss this, and you'll keep treating your mind's worst guesses as gospel truth. In this video, I'll show you number one, why your brain constructs stories that feel like reality but are built from old data, and why willpower alone will never override them. Number two, where those automatic thought patterns actually come from, the Vedic concept that maps exactly to what neuroscience found about memory and conditioning. Number three, a specific daily practice rooted in something called Sakshi, witness consciousness, that turns you from someone who believes every thought into someone who can audit them like a scientist. Let's get into it. A woman named Priya, mid-30s, sharp, successful by every external measure, told me she understood intellectually that her thoughts weren't real. She had read the books. She had done the therapy. She could explain cognitive distortion better than most clinicians. And yet, the moment her boss sent a one-line email with no context, her nervous system went to full alert. The story was instant. She was being fired. She'd failed. She spent 3 hours in that story before the follow-up email arrived. It was a meeting about the holiday party. Priya's problem wasn't that she lacked information, she lacked a practice. There's a difference. Think about the last time you sent a message and got no reply. What happened inside your head? For most people, the silence doesn't stay neutral for long. The mind fills it. They're ignoring me. I said something wrong. They don't respect me. The mind doesn't present these as guesses. It presents them as conclusions. This is what modern cognitive psychology calls a cognitive distortion, the brain's tendency to build narratives that feel objectively true but are actually filtered through fear, bias, and past conditioning. The brain isn't doing this to hurt you. It's doing it because that's how it was designed. The mind's primary job is prediction. It takes incoming data, cross-references it against everything that's happened before, and generates a story fast enough to keep you safe. Speed matters more than accuracy. That worked well when the threat was a predator in tall grass. It works against you when the threat is a blue check mark that hasn't appeared yet. Pru Bu Pa Du described this as Maya, not a mystical fog, but a functional misperception. The mind takes what is temporary, uncertain, and incomplete and presents it as permanent, certain, and fully known. That's not a spiritual metaphor. That's a description of exactly what the brain does every time it fires a threat response to ambiguous information. The key insight here is this: the story feels true because it's fast. Speed creates the sensation of certainty, but fast is not the same as accurate. The practical problem is that most people try to fix this by arguing with their thoughts. They fact check them. They try to replace bad thoughts with good ones. That approach has a ceiling because you're still inside the story. You're debating the content of the fiction instead of questioning whether the fiction is real at all. The takeaway from this section: the next time a thought arrives that feels like a conclusion, treat it as a first draft, not a fact, a draft. That small shift in framing is the first move toward actually stopping the spiral. This is the question nobody answers well. You can watch 10 videos about cognitive distortion and walk away understanding the mechanism, but still feeling completely controlled by it in the moment. The missing piece is origin. Where do these automatic patterns come from? Because if you don't know where they're rooted, you're trimming weeds at the surface. Western neuroscience has a term for this: implicit memory. The brain stores repeated experiences as automatic response patterns. The more times you experience criticism without encouragement growing up, the more the brain wired "I am not enough" as a background operating assumption. Not a thought you choose, but a lens the mind looks through before you even know you're looking. The Vedic tradition mapped this 3,000 years before the first neuroscience paper. The Sanskrit word is samskara, literally translated impression. A samskara is a groove worn into the mind by repeated experience, a thought, a feeling, a reaction that has been run so many times it becomes the default path, like water that always finds the same channel because the channel is already there. Here's why this matters practically. Modern psychology says your distorted thoughts come from cognitive patterns. True, but that framing makes the problem feel like a software bug, something to be patched. The Samskara model says the distortion comes from deep impressions formed through repetition, which means the solution is also repetition. New impressions run consistently until they carve a new channel. This is exactly what neuroplasticity research confirms. The brain doesn't delete old pathways, it builds new ones that become stronger through use until the old ones are no longer the default. The Vedic framework and modern neuroscience are describing the same phenomenon from different angles. What this means for you, the reason you intellectually understand that your thoughts aren't real but still feel controlled by them in the moment, is that understanding is cognitive. Samskaras are pre-cognitive. They fire before conscious thought arrives. You cannot think your way out of a pattern that lives below the level of thinking. You need a practice that works at the same depth the pattern does. The takeaway, stop trying to outthink your thought patterns. The distortion isn't in your thinking, it's in the groove the thinking runs through. To stop believing your thoughts automatically, you have to work at the level of the groove, not the thought. In the 1980s, psychologists developing acceptance and commitment therapy introduced a concept they called the observer self, the part of you that can notice thoughts without being fused with them. It was presented as a therapeutic technique. It was also quietly a rediscovery. The Upanishads call this Sakshi, the witness, not a technique, a fundamental dimension of consciousness that has always been present but is rarely recognized because the mind is too loud. Sakshi is not a state you achieve, it's a capacity you already have that gets buried under the noise of automatic thought. The difference between the Western framing and the Vedic one matters. ACT teaches the observer self as a coping skill, something you deploy when you're struggling. Sakshi is a way of being. The goal isn't to use it when things get hard. The goal is to live from it as your primary orientation, so that when thoughts arrive, including the painful ones, you're already standing on ground that isn't made of thought. The practical application is a daily practice called witnessing inquiry. It takes about 5 minutes. You can do it first thing in the morning, before the day's noise arrives. The structure is simple. Sit quietly, let thoughts come, don't chase them, don't suppress them. Then ask one question about whatever thought appears. Is this a fact or is this an interpretation? Not to debate it, not to replace it, just to notice what category it belongs to. Fact, my boss sent a short email. Interpretation, my boss is angry with me. Fact, I haven't heard back. Interpretation, they don't respect me. The moment you sort a thought into its correct category, you've activated Sakshi. You've stepped out of the story and into the position of the scientist. The thought is the data. You're the one analyzing it. Do this every morning for 2 weeks, and something shifts. Not because you've deleted the old samskaras, you haven't, but because you've started carving a new groove, the habit of witnessing. And over time, that groove becomes stronger than the old one. The ancient Vedic texts describe this as the beginning of viveka, discernment, the capacity to distinguish between what the mind presents and what is actually true. Modern psychology calls it metacognition. Both traditions agree on the mechanism. You cannot stop believing your thoughts by fighting them. You stop believing them by learning to see them clearly from a position that isn't inside them. The takeaway, 5 minutes of witnessing inquiry every morning, sorting thoughts into fact or interpretation, is not a coping skill. It's the beginning of a permanent shift in where you stand in relation to your own mind. That practice works. And for a lot of people, starting it is enough to feel a real difference in the first week. But if you've tried versions of this on your own, the journaling, the mindfulness apps, the self inquiry, and you still find yourself back inside the story when the pressure hits, that gap between knowing and doing is exactly what I work through with people one on one. I do a free 15 to 30-minute call. No pitch, no agenda, just a real conversation about where you're stuck. By the end of it, you'll have a clear picture of what's actually driving your thought patterns and one specific next step that fits your situation, whether we ever work together again or not. The link to book is in the description at dailymindreset.com/consultation. It's free, it's personal, and you walk away with a plan either way. If this way of thinking about the mind is new to you, Subscribe. This channel goes deeper into this territory every week. Tell me in the comments, what's one thought pattern you keep returning to that you know isn't true, but can't seem to stop believing?